My own mother threw a bowl of stew at me because I wouldn't give my $600,000 apartment to my pregnant sister. I'm Cassidy, 30, and for once I said no. But what do you do when saying no makes you the villain in your own family? Have you ever been punished just for protecting your peace? Let me know in the comments. I'm listening. I didn't expect the moment to feel this quiet. The real estate agent pushed the final document across the glossy desk, her gold bracelet clinking lightly as she gestured for my signature. I signed, handed her the pen, and she smiled with that real estate smile that somehow felt both warm and transactional. Then she placed the keys in my palm, 3 of them, looped through a plastic tag that still had the old address typed in faded ink. Just like that, I owned something no one could take away. Sam was waiting by the curb when I stepped out of the notary office. She was holding a small to-go tray with 2 iced coffees and waving like we were still in college. The spring breeze was warm but teasing, tugging at the sleeves of her oversized denim jacket. "You did it," she grinned, handing me one of the drinks. "So, are we going to scream or just stare at each other awkwardly for a full minute?" "I'm exhausted," I laughed, but I let out a small whoop anyway. I bought an apartment. She bumped her shoulder into mine. No mortgage, no roommates, and no sharing one bathroom with a flaky yoga instructor named Serenity. We both laughed, though mine faded a little faster. As we drove toward the apartment, I stared out the passenger window, watching the streets of Denver roll past in soft blurs. It was a city trying to grow without forgetting what it used to be. Murals half-faded next to sleek coffee shops, old brick churches across from co-working spaces. In some ways, it reminded me of myself. "Have you told your mom yet?" Sam asked, gently, keeping her eyes on the road. I shook my head. "She'll find out eventually." The apartment building was modest. 2 floors, faded white siding, but clean. Quiet. The unit was on the top corner. When I opened the door for the first time, the hinges creaked, and the air inside smelled like a mix of fresh paint and neglect. The walls were covered in floral wallpaper, roses and vines and soft pinks and greens that felt more grandmother than modern, but the hardwood floors had potential. I stepped in slowly, letting my fingers brush along the kitchen counter. The tile was cracked. The fridge was ancient. The cabinets were mismatched, but it was mine. "Okay, yes," Sam said behind me, setting the coffee down on a cardboard box. "It needs love, and maybe a flamethrower." "I've got time and YouTube," I said, smiling for real now. "That counts as a plan." Sam walked over to her bag and pulled out something wrapped in tissue paper. She handed it to me like it was delicate. "For your first night of peace," she said. Inside was a small candle, hand-poured, labeled Jasmine and Rain. I blinked too fast, then hugged her before I could get embarrassed. We spent the next hour walking through the rooms. Sam measured the narrow hallway while I made a mental list. Scrape the wallpaper, repaint the living room, swap the hardware on the cabinets. We opened all the windows to let the stale air out and the light in. Later that evening, after Sam had gone, I sat on the floor with a pad of paper and a pencil, scribbling down to-do lists with little arrows and dollar signs. My body was sore from crouching, my palms already blistered from the wallpaper scraper. But my heart? My heart felt quiet, full, like I'd stepped into a version of myself I didn't think I'd ever get to meet. Then my phone rang. The name flashed across the screen. Mom. I hesitated, took a breath, answered. "Cassidy, hi, sweetheart," Meredith's voice chirped. She sounded bubbly, which meant she was hiding something. "Hi, Mom, everything okay?" "Oh, yes, just fine. I need you to come over this Saturday. We're having a little family get-together, just a few people, 4 o'clock. "Is there a reason?" "It's a surprise," she said, drawing out the word like it was a song. "And bring that chocolate cake from the bakery near your new place. The one with the buttercream. You know the one." I blinked. "That's oddly specific." "Well, it's your sister's favorite. Elise will be there. Everyone will." I frowned. "You're being weird. What's going on?" "Nothing," she said too quickly. Just don't be late, it's important." And then she hung up. The call lasted exactly 1 minute and 42 seconds. I stared at the blank screen for a long time before I reached into the tissue paper and pulled out Sam's candle. I lit it, setting it on the window ledge, and watched the flame flicker against the glass as night fell outside. I didn't know what kind of family meeting required cake and secrecy, but I already regretted saying yes. "You made it," my mom said, beaming as she opened the front door. Her arms reached for the cake box in my hands before I could even offer it. "Perfect, right on time." She kissed the air near my cheek and ushered me inside with that fluttery hostess energy that always made me feel like a guest in my own childhood home. Her tone was sugar-sweet, but her eyes flicked behind me, scanning the driveway as if she expected someone better to arrive just after me. The house smelled like rosemary and pot roast. The dining room sparkled under the weight of the crystal chandelier, which only came down from its linen shroud twice a year. Thanksgiving and Christmas. The good china had been laid out, each place setting aligned with the precision of a showroom. There were far more chairs than I expected. I paused in the entryway. "Is this just family?" "Of course, honey," she said quickly. "Just our close circle." That circle apparently included Aunt Rachel, who I hadn't seen in 4 years, 2 of Elise's friends from high school, and Adam's parents. I didn't recognize half the people in the living room, and I was pretty sure one of them was Elise's old dance teacher. Elise herself sat on the couch, glowing in a champagne sweater set, her hand clasped delicately in Adam's. Her hair was curled in soft waves, and her eyes darted toward me, then away, in that practiced flick I'd seen since we were kids. Adam gave me a nod, cool, polite, maybe a little smug. I returned it with the same energy I'd offer a parking meter. Mom placed the cake in the center of the long dining table like it was the final jewel in a crown. "Everyone," she called, clinking a spoon against a wine glass, "let's move to the table. Dinner's ready." I slipped into a seat near the end, across from Uncle Rob and diagonal from Elise. The air buzzed with small talk. Baby names, football, office gossip, and the clink of silverware on porcelain filled the lulls. I scooped some green chili casserole onto my plate, more for something to do than because I was hungry. And then Mom stood up. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice lilting like a speech she'd practiced. "Tonight is a very special evening. Our family has wonderful news to share." I braced myself. "Elise is expecting," she said, eyes shining. Applause broke out. Cheers. A few gasps. Someone actually said, "Blessings," as if we were at church. Elise looked down, blushing, and Adam tightened his grip on her hand. "And," Mom continued, "they're engaged. We'll be planning a spring wedding." Even louder applause this time. Someone whistled. Elise looked at me briefly like she was checking my expression, then turned back toward the table. I clapped too, genuinely. Despite everything, I was happy for her. She looked calm, like someone who'd been handed a map with every road already marked. But then Mom's tone shifted. "And we have something else to celebrate," she said, placing a hand on the back of my chair. "Cassidy, stand up for a second." My stomach twisted. I stood awkwardly. Everyone turned toward me. "This is our Cassidy," Mom announced proudly, like I was a debutante instead of her 30-year-old accountant daughter. "She recently bought herself an apartment. Isn't that amazing?" A few scattered claps, and, "Oh, wow," a nod from someone chewing. I smiled weakly and sat back down. "She's always been so responsible," Mom went on, "frugal, determined, never asks for help." I stiffened. "And now," she said, turning toward Elise and Adam, "I think it's time we talk about how family supports family." The room quieted. "Elise and Adam are just starting their life together," she continued, "with a baby on the way and wedding expenses. Well, it's a lot. Cassidy, darling, don't you think it would be generous, appropriate even, for you to gift them your apartment?" The silence was so sudden, it was almost comical. I blinked. "I'm sorry. What?" Mom's smile didn't waver. "You're doing so well, sweetheart. You've always said you don't need much. Elise and Adam need a stable home for the baby, and your apartment is just sitting there. 2 bedrooms close to the hospital. It's perfect. I felt heat rising up my neck. It's not sitting there. I live there. Of course, she said quickly, but you could move back here for a bit. It's not forever. Dad cleared his throat, not meeting my eyes. You know, it would be a real help to them. Elise looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. Adam shrugged and gave me a crooked grin. It'd be the ultimate big sister move. My hands were cold around my fork. I looked across the table at the people I'd shared holidays and birthdays with. Aunt Rachel was nodding. Adam's mom murmured something about how families make sacrifices. No one looked shocked. This wasn't spontaneous, this was rehearsed. You want my home? I asked, my voice quieter than I expected. It's what family does for each other, Mom said, eyes gleaming. I looked at her, then at Elise, then around the room. And suddenly, I remembered my 16th birthday. The year I got a used wallet while Elise had a full party the year after, with a rented DJ, balloon arch, and a chocolate fountain. I remembered standing on this same porch with my wallet in one hand and a paper plate in the other, watching Elise unwrap a silver necklace while everyone applauded. I looked back at the table, at the plates glinting under the chandelier, at the wine glasses full and the candles flickering, and realized I was the only one not playing along, and I wasn't going to start now. I didn't shout, I didn't cry, I simply said no. And that's when things broke, literally. It wasn't loud at first. In fact, there was a beat of silence after my answer, as if the entire table had collectively failed to process what I'd just said. Then Meredith exhaled sharply through her nose, like I'd dropped a dish. You can't be serious, she said. I am, I replied. My voice was steady. I didn't flinch. Meredith blinked, then straightened. Cassidy, don't be dramatic. The word hit harder than I expected. It dragged me back to a memory I hadn't thought of in years. Me at 7, crying because Elise had snapped the head off my favorite doll. I'd brought it to our mom, tears streaking my cheeks, only to be told I was too sensitive, that Elise didn't mean it, and nobody likes a scene. I swallowed hard and repeated, I'm not giving them my apartment. Across the table, Elise's eyes welled with tears. She pressed her hand to her chest and looked down at her plate. Adam's jaw tightened. It's not like we're asking for a kidney, he muttered. You're asking for everything I've worked for, I said. For 8 years, I saved every extra dollar. I skipped vacations. I lived in a studio the size of a closet. And now you want me to just hand over my home? You're not a mother, Meredith snapped. You don't understand what it means to sacrifice. Don't do this here, Paul said quietly. He didn't look at me. He just reached for his wine glass. I'm not doing anything, I said, my voice still calm. You are. Around the table, there was an uncomfortable shifting of chairs. Silverware clinked awkwardly. Someone coughed. You've always been this way, Meredith continued, her voice rising. Always thinking only of yourself. Never willing to bend. You think just because you bought a little condo, you're better than everyone? My hands tightened in my lap. I never said that. No, she said coldly. You didn't have to. The next moment happened so quickly, I barely registered it. Meredith reached for the porcelain serving bowl, the one that held the beef stew, the one that had been in our family since before I was born. Without a second thought, she lifted it and hurled it across the table. It struck me square in the chest. Not my face, thank God, but high enough that thick brown gravy and chunks of carrot and potato exploded across my blouse. The weight of it knocked me slightly backward in my chair. The bowl shattered on the floor beside me, shards skittering under the table. No one moved. No one gasped. No one said, "Are you okay?" I sat there, stew dripping down my front, stunned. The heat soaked through my shirt, sticky and clinging. A few green beans clung to the sleeve of my cardigan. I looked around the table, hoping for something. Paul kept sipping his wine. Elise was crying now, but still hadn't said a word. Adam looked smug, like justice had been served. Someone at the far end muttered, "She's always been difficult." I reached for a napkin, wiped my chin, and stood up slowly. My chair scraped loudly against the tile. I didn't say a word. I walked to the entryway, picked up my purse from the bench, and stepped back into my shoes. Slowly, deliberately, like I was getting ready to walk into an interview instead of out of my own family's ambush. Behind me, Meredith hissed, "You're walking out? After everything we've done for you?" I paused at the door, turned my head just enough to speak. "I brought the cake," I said. "That's all you asked for." Then I left. The night air hit my face like a second slap, cooler than I remembered. I climbed into my car, hands trembling slightly as I turned the key. The radio came on softly, mid-symphony, but I shut it off. I didn't want music. I didn't want anything. I drove in silence. Traffic was light. Denver after dinner. Lights blurred through my windshield as my blouse stuck to my skin, still damp. I could smell the stew on me, onion, pepper, beef, and it made me want to scream, but I didn't. When I reached my apartment, I didn't go straight to the shower. I sat on the floor by the kitchen window, the same one where Sam's candle still flickered, and stared at the reflection of myself in the glass. I looked tired, sticky, hollow. Then I remembered. The folder. I pulled myself up and crossed to the small file cabinet wedged beside my desk. Inside, tucked behind my lease and bank records, was Grandma's will. I unfolded it with careful fingers, reading each line until I found what I needed. "The house shall be split equally between my two granddaughters, Cassidy Wren and Elise Wren. 50%. I owned half of the home they'd let my parents live in, rent-free, for years. They were living there on my goodwill, not legal right. All this time, they acted like I owed them, like my worth was measured by how easily I could be manipulated. And suddenly, something inside me clicked. I didn't feel fury. I felt clear. I knew exactly what I needed to do next. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted distance. And maybe, finally, a little peace. The apartment still smelled faintly of beef stew. No matter how many times I scrubbed the inside of the car, no matter how many shirts I laundered, it lingered. It was in the threads, the air, maybe even in me. I stood in my living room staring at the half-painted wall I had started before the dinner. A roller tray still sat in the corner, the paint in it long dried and cracked like the surface of a forgotten lake. My phone lay face down on the counter. The candle Sam had given me weeks ago was nearly burned down to the wick. Grandma's words floated back to me, as they sometimes did when silence stretched long enough to let them surface. Fair doesn't mean easy, it means clear, and I was starting to see things clearly. I opened my laptop and Googled real estate attorney Denver. After scanning a few listings, I picked the one with the most boring website. No flashy graphics, no fake smiling models pretending to be clients. Just a single phrase in serif font. "We protect what's yours." His name was Jeremy Blackwell. When his assistant picked up, I kept my voice even. "Hi, I'd like to schedule a consultation regarding a property I partially own. There's family involved, and I need help understanding my rights." 2 days later, I found myself sitting in a leather chair across from Jeremy in his downtown office. He was in his 50s, gray at the temples with a voice that never rose above necessary volume. His walls were lined with awards and watercolors of Colorado landscapes. There was no family photo on his desk. After I explained the situation, Jeremy nodded and looked down at the copy of Grandma's will I'd brought. "It's straightforward," he said. "You and your sister each own 50% of the property. Your parents have no legal claim." I felt a knot in my chest loosen, but only slightly. "I'm not trying to hurt anyone," I told him. "I just can't let them keep steamrolling me." He looked at me for a moment, then said, "Wanting to be treated with basic respect isn't cruel, Ms. Wren. It's the floor." When I got home, I reheated leftover pad thai and barely touched it. My phone lit up repeatedly with texts from numbers I recognized, but didn't feel like naming. I didn't open them. Then, around 9 p.m., came the blow I hadn't expected. A tag notification on Facebook. I hadn't posted in weeks, maybe months. But there it was. A photo of Elise smiling with her hands over her stomach, standing next to a "It's a Boy" banner. My mother had written, "Please pray for Cassidy." She's turning her back on her pregnant sister. Elise needs a home, and Cassidy has one. But she refuses to help. I raise my daughters to care for each other. I didn't expect one to forget. There were hearts, prayers, a few sad face emojis, but mostly comments. I can't believe Cassidy would do that. Family comes first. Poor Elise. So much stress is bad for the baby. No one asked what really happened. No one mentioned a flying bowl of stew. No one wondered how hard it might have been to say no to an entire table of people who already decided what I owed them. I closed the app. I sat on the floor. A few minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Then a second. I opened it to find Sam, holding a greasy brown paper bag and a bottle of sparkling apple cider. "I figured you weren't eating," she said, stepping in without waiting. She didn't ask about the Facebook post. She didn't offer advice. She just sat beside me on the floor, placed the food between us, and tore off a piece of fried chicken. I followed her lead. We ate in silence, the kind that only close friendships can hold without cracking. Afterward, Sam handed me a towel, a soft one, fresh from the dryer, still warm. "I brought it in case you needed something that didn't feel like a weapon," she said simply. That night, I emailed Jeremy. I told him I was ready. The next day, he drafted a formal letter of intent. Either Elise buys me out at fair market value, or we sell the house and split the proceeds. It was simple. It was clear. It was mine. He sent it certified mail, signature required. 2 days later, around 7:30 p.m., just as I was folding laundry, the pounding started. Not a knock. A full-fisted, righteous thunder of fists slamming into my front door. "Cassidy Ann Wren!" My mother's voice pierced the hallway like a siren. "Open this door right now! How dare you threaten us with lawyers? After all we've done!" I picked up my phone and quietly pressed record. "Your sister is pregnant, and you're trying to make her homeless?" I didn't move. I didn't speak. "You ungrateful girl. You think a piece of paper makes you better than your family?" I sat on the floor, recording every word as her voice grew louder, more erratic, mixing pleas with scolding, guilt with scripture. At one point, she began praying, loudly, performatively. "Lord, forgive Cassidy for her pride, for her selfishness, for breaking this family apart." I heard a neighbor's door creak open down the hall. Still, I stayed silent. Eventually, her voice began to fade. A few last knocks. Then, "I forgive you, Cassidy," she shouted, almost triumphantly, as if she'd won. I waited 5 more seconds, then hit stop on the recording. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The last time I sat across from my family at a table, I left covered in stew. This time, I wore navy blue and a calm expression. The wind bit at my ankles as I stepped off the light rail and walked the final block to Jeremy's office. A thin layer of frost clung to the curb edges, and every breath left a cloud in front of my face. November in Denver was not romantic. It was cold, gray, and unforgiving, just like this day was bound to be. Jeremy met me in the hallway, handed me a bottle of water, and nodded toward the conference room. His confidence had a way of grounding me, like someone had checked all the emergency exits before I walked in. Inside, the space was neutral. Beige walls, thin carpet, a rectangular table stretched the length of the room, 2 chairs on each long side. A pot of untouched coffee sat in the corner like a neglected peace offering. I took my seat. Jeremy sat beside me, laying out a manila folder and tapping his pen twice, sharply against the table. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. They arrived a few minutes later. Meredith wore pearls and a coat that looked like she'd pulled it from the back of the closet in a hurry. Paul shuffled in behind her, face as unreadable as ever. Elise looked exhausted, her belly now fully pronounced beneath a bulky wool sweater. Adam looked annoyed before the meeting even began. Their lawyer, a woman named Julia McKnight, introduced herself with the kind of smile that said, "Let's get this over with." We all sat. Jeremy opened. "The terms are simple," he said. "My client, Cassidy Wren, co-owns the property at 1180 East Bertram Avenue. That ownership is equal, 50%. As outlined in the legally binding will of the late Margaret Wren, Julia adjusted her glasses and replied smoothly, "While we don't dispute the will, we must acknowledge the circumstances. My clients have resided in the property for years. Miss Elise Wren is expecting a child. Uprooting them now would create undue hardship, emotional stress, and potential financial instability." Jeremy slid a printed screenshot of the Facebook post across the table, then a flash drive. "Here is a public statement posted by Mrs. Meredith Wren. It accuses my client of cruelty and disloyalty. Also on the drive is a 15-minute audio file, recorded outside Miss Wren's apartment door, of Mrs. Wren yelling, threatening, and invoking religious condemnation in a residential hallway." Julia blinked, then composed herself. "That isn't relevant to ownership." "It is," Jeremy countered, "because it shows that my client has been subject to harassment and that she has every legal right to enforce boundaries, including requesting the sale or buyout of the property." No one said anything for a moment. Then Meredith spoke. Her voice trembled just enough to be noticeable. "I was angry," she said, looking directly at me. "I lost my temper. I said things I didn't mean. But I'm still your mother, Cassidy. That has to count for something." My heart kicked once in my chest, but didn't rise. I met her gaze and said quietly, "It counted. For a long time, even when it hurt." Paul stayed silent. Elise leaned forward, her voice almost a whisper. "You're tearing us apart. Over a house." I turned to her. "Number, I'm trying to keep myself together, after years of pretending everything was fair when it never was." Adam huffed. "So what? You're just done being a sister." "I'm done being the family sacrifice." The room tensed. Julia looked between us, then exhaled. "Let's take 10 minutes. Outside the room, I sat in a small lobby with Jeremy, while the others stepped into a private office. I could hear murmurs through the wall. Jeremy didn't say much, just handed me a peppermint and said, "They know they're cornered. Stay steady." I nodded. The candy wrapper crackled in my hand. I remembered being 12, sitting in this same stillness outside a principal's office because Elise had cheated on a test, but I had been the one called in to set a better example. "Elise just needs more help," Mom had whispered back then. "You're the strong one." I had believed her. 10 minutes passed, then 15. When we were called back in, Julia's tone had shifted. She spoke slower, warier. "We're prepared to accept the terms," she said. "The house will be listed. Net proceeds split evenly. The buyers must be independent third parties, and the Wren parents will vacate within 45 days of sale." Jeremy agreed. Meredith burst into tears. Not loud ones, not wailing, just quiet, trembling sobs, her hands clutching a damp tissue, her shoulders curling inward. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. "We're your family." I didn't answer. Jeremy handed me a pen. I picked it up and signed the agreement. My name looked unfamiliar in print, like it belonged to someone braver than me. The lawyers exchanged papers. Elise stared at hers like it had been written in another language. Then she looked up at me. Her voice was small. "You really won't come to the baby shower?" I stood, sliding the pen back into my purse. I wasn't invited, and I walked out. Peace wasn't loud. It was soft, steady, and completely mine. January sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting long stripes across the warm wood floors of my apartment. The last of the renovation dust had been swept away weeks ago, but I still caught myself brushing invisible flecks from the baseboards. Some habits took longer to unlearn than others. The walls were now a muted sage green, a color I'd picked on a whim during a long Saturday at the hardware store. It reminded me of eucalyptus and quiet afternoons. 2 framed art prints hung above the couch, local landscapes, both gifts to myself. I'd never realized how strange it felt to decorate for no one's taste but my own. The apartment no longer echoed when I walked through it. Rugs softened each step. A new lamp glowed in the corner like a second moon. The place smelled faintly of banana bread, something I'd baked for the first time the night before. It didn't rise perfectly, but it was mine. The sale of the house had gone faster than any of us expected. The market was still hot, and the buyers, some young couple from Boulder, offered above asking. After closing costs, Elise and I each received just under $240,000. I didn't ask what Elise did with her share. Jeremy told me in his usual clipped tone that she'd used it as a down payment on a new house, a modest 3-bedroom in Littleton. Meredith and Paul moved in with her. I didn't ask how that arrangement was going. I didn't need to know. My half went somewhere else. I'd started working with a financial advisor, someone Sam recommended. We met at a coffee shop twice, and now we talked by phone every few weeks. I bought into a real estate investment trust, opened a separate savings plan, and started looking at modest retirement contributions. I didn't know what my future would look like, but for the first time, I felt like I was building something instead of patching it together. The kitchen had new hardware now, brushed nickel handles that gleamed like quiet victories. The stove worked without making a strange clicking sound. I even had a new set of mixing bowls. The old ones, with the faded floral rim, had gone out with the trash 2 weeks ago. I didn't feel guilty. One night, while organizing the bookshelf, I found an old novel tucked behind a stack of tax folders. It had belonged to Grandma. When I flipped through it, a small yellowed note fell out. "Take care of yourself first. They'll call it selfish. It's not." Her handwriting looped with quiet confidence. I pressed the paper between 2 pages of my journal. Later that week, I framed a photo of us together, a park picnic, me age 10, her in oversized sunglasses, holding a lemonade and smiling like the world had stopped spinning for her granddaughters that afternoon. It now sat on the shelf beside the candle Sam had given me, the same one I'd lit on my first night here. The wax was low now, a little warped on one side, but it still smelled like jasmine and rain. Sam came over that Saturday carrying a thermos of lentil soup and a bag of crusty bread from the corner bakery. We sat cross-legged on the rug, sipping from mismatched mugs and talking about spring trips. Maybe Santa Fe, maybe a train ride up the coast. We didn't mention Meredith, or Elise, or the house. Some silences are chosen and sacred. At one point, Sam asked, "Do you miss them?" I thought about it. "I miss what I thought we were," I said, "but I'm not sure that ever really existed." She didn't try to correct me. That's why she's my best friend. Later that night, I scrolled through my phone and saw Elise's baby announcement, a photo of her and Adam holding a newborn wrapped in a soft blue blanket. The baby's name was Owen. He had a full head of dark hair and his mother's lips. I stared at the screen for a moment. Not out of sadness, not out of longing, just observation. There was no ache, no anger, just a quiet space where something might have been once. I clicked the screen off and set the phone aside. I walked around the apartment, turning off lights. I folded the throw blanket on the couch, rinsed 2 mugs, blew out the candle. In the reflection of the kitchen window, I saw myself, not the version of me who flinched under expectations, not the one who measured love by how much she could endure. Just me. I don't know if I'll ever be family to them again, but for the first time, I'm finally family to myself. I don't know if I'll ever be family to them again, but for the first time, I've become family to myself. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is draw a line, not out of anger, but out of love for our own well-being. Family isn't just about blood, it's about respect, presence, and the people who show up when you have nothing left to give but honesty. As my grandmother once said, Taking care of yourself first isn't selfish. It's survival with grace. If this story brought up a memory or touched something in your heart, I'd love to hear your thoughts. You never know who might need to read your words and feel a little less alone.